All right, today we're doing something a little different. We're going to take a snapshot, a single 1 hour broadcast of the talk show The Five, and really break down what happened. What were the big arguments? What topics did they cover in just that 1 hour? So, right off the bat, you get a feel for the show's vibe. It kicks off with these kind of quirky, very specific introductions for each host. It's not your typical news broadcast, that's for sure. It immediately sets this really unique, informal tone. Okay, and a quick but really important note before we go any further. Our goal here isn't to say who's right or who's wrong. We're not fact-checking the arguments. We are simply laying out what was said, how the hosts framed the conversation, and just what the discourse looked like. All right, first up, they jump straight into some heavy-hitting global politics. The main topic? A really tense, high-stakes situation, a temporary truce between the United States and Iran. So here's the context they laid out. We're on day 2 of this truce. It's pretty fragile, but marine traffic is starting to move again. President Trump seems optimistic, but at the same time, he's threatening some serious consequences if a deal falls through. And this is where it gets really political. Democrats are already calling for the 25th Amendment to be used against him. And boom, right there you have the central conflict laid out for the audience. You've got one side, the Democrats, being presented as saying the president is unfit for office, even suffering from dementia. And then on the other side, you have the show's hosts pushing back, framing those exact same calls as nothing more than a political bat signal for fundraising, a way to sabotage the president right in the middle of these critical negotiations. One of the hosts, Jesse Waters, offered up a really interesting take on this. He argued that President Trump's style, which gets criticized a lot for being blunt, is actually the right way to talk to leaders in that part of the world. He basically said Trump talks like a Persian strongman, and that language of strength, respect, honor is what they understand and respond to. But then, to add a little more nuance, host Harold Ford Jr. jumped in. He started asking some really important questions like, wait a minute, are we even sure everyone agrees on what this truce is? Who's actually in charge here? And he made this great point that while the U.S. is caught up in all this political fighting, countries like Russia and China might be the ones who are actually gaining an advantage. And then, to cap off the whole segment, they read a social media post from the president, live, on the air. It was about reports of Iran charging fees to tankers, and the post was super direct. They better not, and if they are, they better stop now. It was this incredible moment of seeing the news happen in real time, with the president asserting control right then and there. Okay, so after that deep dive on Iran, the show just completely shifts gears. We're leaving the global stage and jumping right into domestic politics, specifically some new polling numbers. So the whole conversation was kicked off by this recent CNN poll, and what it showed was the Republican Party's approval rating was about 4 points higher than the Democratic Party's. That little 4-point gap was the jumping-off point for the whole debate. Instead of talking broadly, the hosts really zeroed in on one person as a kind of case study, Virginia politician Abigail Spanberger. Greg Gutfeld, one of the hosts, did not mince words. He called it pure deception, claiming she tricked voters by running as a moderate, but then, when she was in office, she started governing from the left. But again, Harold Ford Jr. came in with a different perspective. He basically said, you know what, voters might not care that much about these partisan attacks. What they really want are answers. They want to know what you're going to do about the economy, about healthcare, about how the government spends their money. And just like that, another big shift. We go from the national political divide all the way down to a very specific local issue. This time, we're talking about a controversy brewing in New York City. So what's the deal here? Well, it's all about the mayor of New York, Zoran Mamdani, and this huge promise he made during his campaign. He told everyone, next year begins a new era of fast and free buses. A pretty bold promise, right? So the hosts kind of walked the audience through the whole timeline. First, there was the big promise, free buses for all. Then the problem, the mayor announces, actually, it's not going to happen this year. And finally, the reasons why. They pointed to a similar plan in Kansas City that got canceled because it was just way too expensive. And they were having issues with, as they put it, passenger behavior. And this is where they brought in that classic political saying from Mario Cuomo, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. It was the perfect way to frame this whole thing, right? It presents the mayor's situation as this age-old story of a politician's beautiful, poetic campaign promises crashing head-on into the complicated, messy prose of actually having to run things. All right, After that story, the pace of the show just picks up like crazy. They launch into this rapid-fire segment, just bouncing between a bunch of different culture war topics and viral clips. The first thing they showed was this video that was making the rounds online. It's a clip of a Canadian lawmaker talking about budget cuts in Parliament. But what they talked about wasn't the budget cuts. It was this incredibly long acronym the official used. The hosts argued that by lumping so many different groups into one long acronym, it actually takes away from the focus on a really serious issue, missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is what the MMIW part stands for. One of the hosts even called it stolen victimhood. And then, talk about whiplash. In a move that really sums up the show's style, they pivot from that really heavy, serious topic to something completely different and way, way lighter. The question? Who's better at finding deals at the grocery store? So 5 to 10%, what's that all about? Well, according to a report they were talking about, that's how much more a family's grocery bill goes up when the husband does the shopping instead of the wife. Kind of funny, right? Okay, so to wrap up the show, they get to the final segment, which is called One More Thing. And it's pretty much a free-for-all. Each host gets a minute or so to share a personal story or just something interesting they saw. And man, this segment really shows you the wild range of the show. I mean, look at this list. You have an award for a retired detective, a report on Indigenous protests in Brazil, the Pope meeting the Harlem Globetrotters, and a firefighter who's gone viral online. All of that, back to back, in just a few minutes. Incredible. So you step back and look at the whole hour. They covered a global truce, a mayor's broken promise, and who's better at buying groceries. So what does a snapshot like this really tell us about our modern political discourse? It's this incredible, maybe even dizzying mix of the profoundly serious with the ridiculously trivial. It's a fascinating look at how information gets packaged and delivered to us today, isn't it?